Hello, Jane Hogan here, Jane Hogan Health, and I'm really excited today to welcome my special guest, Todd Nyholm, who is going to talk to us. Yes, welcome, Todd. Who's going to talk to us about digestion and a whole bunch of things. He's got a really interesting background. I think this is going to be really beneficial for you. So, Todd, you practice somatic therapy. We're going to dive into that in a little bit. But first of all, I really like to get the background on my guests on what drew you into this space, because all of us that are working in this alternative health kind of space have a background. We have our own history. So
Oh,
tell
yeah.
me a little bit about yours.
So I've had problems with my health as long as I can remember. And a lot of them, the obvious ones were digestion. And if you can think of a digestive problem, I've probably had it over the years and had to find ways to work through it. And a number of doctors and a number of different healing modalities to get myself through all of that. And I think probably naturally anyone who's had those kinds of problems, their attention goes there. And so we often end up, I think, working there and trying to help other people with the problems that we've had, especially if it took us a while to find some help. And so we end up kind of aiming that direction ourselves. I spent a lot of years studying all kinds of things. So
Yeah. When we've got our own health issues and we're not getting the answers that we want and need, well, naturally you kind of dive into it because we don't want to accept it, right? We want to get better. And I think
exactly.
part of us, we know that innately our body wants to heal and be healthy and strong. So we got to just figure it out, right? So it sounds like you are a figure outer.
That's probably fair to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what you figured out and how you figured it out.
Okay. So a lot of, I think what I really figured out for myself was the connections between things that often don't get addressed. And so like digestion obviously affects so many different things. And for a lot of people, the digestive problems end up in slow thinking and emotional troubles and all kinds of joint pain. And so as I looked through different things and I connected different things, that really helped my health a lot. And so that took me into acupressure and acupuncture and Ayurveda, but also working with medical doctors and osteopaths and some chiropractors and yoga masters and Tai Chi and all kinds of things that I use currently to help my health. And I feel better now in my 40s than I did when I was 5 or 6. And I don't think most people can relate to that. They're going kind of the other way. They felt great, and now things are kind of getting worse for them. So there's a lot of cool things you can do to make yourself feel better as you learn how to put everything into a context that works. So, yeah.
Interesting you talk about some of those modalities, like Tai Chi and acupressure, that a lot of people don't necessarily associate with improving digestion, but they do work.
Oh, yeah. And for a long time, those modalities worked with that specifically. And I think it's just somewhat the perception that we've had. And so I might be sitting there sometimes at 2 a.m. trying to figure something out, reading something someone wrote 3,000 years ago. They would describe the process and I would try it out. And I was like, oh, wow, I feel better. Maybe there's something to all this. And maybe people have known for a long time how to work with things that maybe we miss now because of our interest in surgery and hardcore pharmaceuticals. And so we might miss how to use herbs to spice our food, that might help digestion. And when I figured some of that out, that was kind of eye-opening to me. Like, oh, if I add this spice to what I'm eating, I can digest it a lot better.
Interesting. Let's hear a little bit more about what you found out with that.
Yeah, so for me, I really liked a lot of the Indian spices. So I ended up using a lot of coriander and cumin and turmeric and those kinds of things. And when I went back and I looked at their recipes and then I kind of researched the herbs and what people used them for, I'm like, oh, I think people kind of had this figured out a long time ago. So a lot of their main ways of cooking used herbs that kind of help settle your digestion, or sometimes it helped fire it up a little bit so you could digest better, especially if you found recipes from vegetarians, because it seemed like they needed to use spices to heat their digestion up. And so they have a reasonably interesting way of putting that all together to get something to happen. So I kind of took
Interesting.
over it and worked from there. So, yeah.
So that's sounding a little bit like Ayurvedic um, medicine.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And do you find that it's different for different people? Like not everyone's going to need the same spices because they have, they may have more, I forget the terms, pitta or
Oh,
one
right.
of
Yeah,
the
the
other
different
things.
doshas. Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things I liked about some of those old things is it wasn't that everyone should get the same result and everyone's exactly the same. And if you take this one medication, it'll work for everyone. Because it seemed for me, none of that ever was true. The thing that was always supposed to work often led to a bad consequence, and, that
Mm.
kind of thing. Because I think not everyone is exactly the same. And so when I
Oh,
tripped over that, yeah, the doshas, it was like, oh, maybe that's a big part of the reason why. And certainly when you get into that area where you're not really sick, but you're kind of in between, like here's really healthy and here's really sick and you're in here, I think there's a lot of deviation between people and what they need at that time.
super interesting. So right, you've been working for about 18 years, you said, and you do a lot of this physical kind of manipulation. Let's just hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've studied a number of different methods that work directly with the body to help people's health. And with digestion, I think one of the most underappreciated is visceral manipulation, which is a method that comes down from the old osteopaths. But you work directly with the stomach mechanically and the intestines and different valves and helping people eliminate well and absorb better and take the tension off things and change the pressures so that mechanically they can do better. And that helps, say, if you've had a lot of digestive problems for a long time, often your stomach will kind of like ball up and seize up. And if you can work through all that, then you can open up some different possibilities. I also work a lot with, accidents and joint pain and headaches and anxiety and depression and, all the different things that people are struggling with. But I put it through that sort of physical touch perspective, so I
Mm.
can get to them a little different way than maybe the doctor that comes in and spends 2 minutes with them and gives them a prescription and walks out. So
Mm.
a lot of people never get heard, and that gives me some time with them, so I really get to know them pretty well too. So, yeah.
That's super interesting, and we don't always think about, that there's mechanical stuff going on down there, and that, it might get a little bit mixed up, and not, things not quite in the right place, and that perhaps that's why some of those, like Tai Chi and yoga and, physical movement in general helps, because it does help all those organs get a little bit of movement and massage and kind of get them working again. Would you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely. And often they have a whole like sets of exercises to help you do that. So different ways that you're twisting your torso and different postures you're holding in different positions. So gravity is helping change things, And I think in a lot of ways they had to be really specific with that because they weren't doing surgery or those kinds of things. So they got really focused on, well, here's how you do it through exercise and diet or breathing practices,
Mm.
that kind of thing. And I was
Yeah,
surprised how much it helped me. It was really quite a shock for me at some point. So,
yeah. I mean, I work a lot with talking to people about doing the really deep belly breathing, and it's that alone can make a huge difference with people. I mean, it helps them relax, but which helps with digestion, but it
oh,
also helps, like, that diaphragm going up and down really helps with all the mechanics going on down there as well. And it's interesting too. These practices are thousands and thousands of years old, and as you said, they didn't have access to surgery back then, so they had to come up with another way to do things. And it's interesting how it's so much less invasive.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. And sometimes it takes a little longer, but you also, I think, build your health as you do it. So you understand your body better and you start to understand a little bit more how much what your body is doing affects your emotions and your mind, and then vice versa. And then they really did an excellent job of putting that all together. So I remember when I was first looking at yoga, they'd have some mental thing that you did, an emotional thing you did along with the posture. And so they were stacking all those things together.
Yeah,
Which
I love that. I mean, we know we're all integrated. We're not, our body isn't separate from our mind and our feelings. So
exactly.
it is all connected. That's really, I really love that with thinking about yoga, for example, because I do yoga, that it's not just a physical practice. There's these other components, and
Yeah.
it does help you become more aware of your body. You get into your body and how it's feeling, and that awareness is huge when it comes to seeing how you're responding to different things.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things like almost we ignore in our society a little bit because we're all so busy and we're all so focused on our mind and being logical, and we kind of miss how useful it is to be in the body, how useful it is to let your mind settle down and give it a
Mhm.
break, and how much that affects anxiety, because I see so many people that are anxious, particularly now with everything that's been going on. Almost everyone that comes in is a little anxious. And if I can get them into their body a little bit, get them to breathe a little bit, get them to relax a little bit, they feel better in all kinds of ways. I think people had a better handle on that before, in part because they didn't have the tools we were talking about earlier, surgery and
Mhm.
pharmaceuticals and things like that.
And we've just, as a society, just gotten a lot busier. Our time is totally filled up, and we just
Mhm.
don't, as you know, in general, make a lot of space and time for just sitting and paying attention to how are we feeling, what are we thinking. So yeah, slowing down is a great tool for figuring out, helping to figure out what's going on with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know that you've got a book out called Off Food. Why do you trouble me so much? I bet a lot of people are asking that question. So let's hear a little bit about your book.
Yeah, so the book came out of me trying to fix some problems I was having with my digestion after I had a surgery that got infected in my abdomen. And so I tried every diet you could imagine, and I couldn't quite get them to all work. And so the way I approached it was much more like we were just talking about, almost in a mindful attention way. And so as I did that and I applied some of the things that I had learned, I came up with a series of principles for myself that I could use while I ate. And so, like, I would sit down, and one of the first principles is think to myself, or even say it out loud, I eat to nourish myself and my body. And so that was a bit like reprogramming myself. So I wasn't eating because it was a long, stressful day, or I wasn't eating because it's 7 p.m. and everyone knows you eat at 7 p.m. Or, all the little things that we do that are almost mental and emotional habits that aren't so good for our digestion and often for our weight. So as I put that book together, I lost about 60 pounds, and I got a lot of the pressure off um, my gut, and where those infections were. And it made such a big difference for me. I was like, well, maybe some other people could use this. And
Wow.
I seem to zero in on writing pretty well because I like to do it. And I have a degree in languages. And so I really like languages and how they form and put together. And so the book kind of came out of me pretty quickly as I was working that way. And I also thought it was an easy way to approach some of the other things that I'm hoping to get out, in terms of helping your health and some of the other things we've been talking about, because I put together some different methods for that. And so many people are struggling with diet. It just seemed like a good way to get in the door a little bit. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're in an age where there's no lack of information. All the information is there, but the downside of that is people are very overwhelmed and they're hearing contradictory things.
All the time.
Try this diet, have this diet, this, carnivore, raw food, this, all these
Oh yeah,
different things.
you bet.
So, and, trained medical people are supporting each one of them. But often I think what is missing is teaching people to figure out what's right for them.
And that's one of the things I really went after with the book. And I say it over and over again. How do you feel about this? And there's a lot of questions that where I try not to tell people, think exactly this. But if you ask yourself this question, what answer comes out of that? What was your
Mhm.
upbringing like? What kind of things did your family eat? Why did they eat those things? And then maybe you
Mhm.
can zero on a diet that works really well for you. I also tried to write the book in kind of a short manner. So it's shorter than I would have liked in a sense, because I wanted people to be able to access it quickly. I met so many people who had read self-help books and they couldn't remember one principle that they had read that they could use because it became so big. There was so much narrative. And so I wrote it in a short way, and I tried to make it small enough people could carry with them because I like to have it with me. So obviously you can put it on your phone and all that kind of good stuff too. And I also tried to be really reassuring. People are really hard on themselves when it comes to losing weight, when it comes to managing a diet, those kinds of things. And they often sort of self-sabotage. So I tried to write it in a conversational manner where it felt like I was almost sitting next to him, like, you got this, you could do this, and tried to build them up a little bit. So I think that's
Excellent.
important. Yeah.
I love how you are talking so much about the mental side of this. It's not just about the physical food that you're eating. There's so much else. I mean, food is not just about the food. Food is also, helps us figure out information about our body. We've got also so many social things around food that affect
Ooh,
what we want to have, and then of course the manufacture of food, the way it's designed to be, make us want to eat it kind of takes us away from naturally what would be best for us. So I really like the way your approach is talking about bringing the whole mental side. And so what are some other kinds of questions you have in there?
Well, I give people a whole set of questions to kind of work through their childhood, because I think a lot of that programming comes from when you're really young, and you get rewarded and you get food. And when things are bad, you get food. And we do this. You watch your favorite movie and someone gets broken up with and they eat the ice cream. And you're like, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to go eat the ice cream when this happens. And it's almost
Mhm.
that kind of proverbial thing that food isn't love. And it's another one of those ways that we connect to things, because you're trying to make up for something somewhere else with food, which works a little bit, but it has its problems at the end. And so if you're looking at what your mind and your emotions are doing and then connecting it to what's happened in the past, you can sort of uproot a lot of that stuff. And then you have a better idea of why you're doing it, at least. So you might be sitting there eating the potato chips. Well, I'm doing this because today was really long. And after you've done that for a while, pretty soon you're having 2 chips instead of half the bag. And then you find a little better maybe mental exercise to remedy that situation rather than food.
Yeah. So it starts with an awareness, right?
I think it always does. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like you start people off by, why, looking at why, well, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And before moving to, well, let's replace it with something that's more serving us, a behavior that's serving us better than simply eating that food that's definitely not serving us.
Yeah, and I think it's a little tricky to go the other way, because your mind is so powerful, your emotions are so powerful, and habits are so powerful. And so trying to live on like broccoli water for 6 weeks to lose weight isn't going to work very well. You're almost certainly going to fail unless you're really hardcore. And I don't know, maybe that's 5% of the population that could just starve themselves for a while. And then it's going to ricochet back on them later anyway. It's hard
Hmm.
to make a change. And especially if you're trying to make a change that's big like food, trying to integrate it into your life and into yourself in different ways really helps a lot.
Mhm. And it's difficult to integrate food changes too, like, moving towards more real food, I would call it real food.
You bet.
Um, and moving away from, processed and sugar and those kinds of things. It's really difficult when everyone around you is still, doing that, eating the sugary foods and eating the processed foods. And,
You
so
bet.
much of the social interactions are around that. So what kind of strategies do you suggest for people for that?
Well, it's a little tricky, and I think one of the first things is to understand and um, is that a lot of food is designed to make you want to eat it more and more and more, and there's a lot of chemistry involved. And if
Yeah.
people knew how much money was thrown at trying to create foods that you can't keep yourself from eating, they probably get a little frustrated. And so I think first you see that and you say, okay, this is manipulating me a little bit. There's one of the things I talked about in the book is I went to visit my brother and someone had some cold French fries on the counter from a famous place. And I ate one, not thinking about it. Tasted terrible. But 10 minutes later, all I could think about was eating more of those fries. And I was like, well, how did that work? It didn't taste good. I didn't enjoy it. Um, and so I think once you kind of understand some of that stuff is designed, then you can kind of back yourself away from it slowly. Um,
Hmm.
and that might take some time. People will come in and say, "Oh, I can't stop eating Cheetos," and I'm like, "Well, I like them too, but there's so much flavor to it, so many flavors enhancers. You have to like back yourself away a little bit so that you can, maybe you have them once a week, and then you have something more natural, like you were talking about. You learn to cook a little better and use some of the spices we were talking about earlier to enjoy the food and try to make the meal almost an experience. And you can kind of deviate yourself from some of the things that everyone else is doing, often habitually, without thinking about it much."
Yeah. I found for myself that celebrations were especially difficult because celebrations are often about food, birthdays, for example, with the birthday cake. Like what is a birthday without a birthday cake?
Yeah,
um,
you bet.
yeah, so that's a really tough one. Do you have any suggestions on something like that in particular?
I would say plan well ahead so that you're looking forward to whatever it is you're going to do to replace it.
Hmm.
So, my ex-wife is actually Japanese and from Japan. And so I spent a lot of time there. And a lot of the foods that they would celebrate with are actually pretty good for you, traditionally. And so if you can learn to find things that work well in a little bit different way, without denying yourself a piece of cake here and there, I don't think you want to make life no fun at all, but there's a
Hmm.
context there. And if you can make it a little bit fun ahead of time, so you get to say, oh, I really like this nabe,
Mm.
which is a Japanese stew that I like a lot, but it's really good for you. But for me, that would feel like a celebration and be good for me. And it's fun to make, and the whole experience is kind of interesting. So I think, again, coming back to the thing about your mind and your emotions, if you can include other things that sort of feed you emotionally, like you're excited about this thing, or just mentally is interesting, like the preparation of food. You're like, oh, I'm going to try these things and put these things together. And now it becomes a whole different experience. And so it's a celebration of something different rather than kind of the low level, well, we're just going to eat a bunch of cake or whatever that is.
Mm.
Although on
So
occasion, that's all right too.
yeah, so still turn it into a celebration, but swap it up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Change it up a little bit so it's fun anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Todd, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience that we haven't covered yet?
um, I really do think we talked about it a little bit, but if you're working on your health, there's nothing better to do at the beginning than tuning in to how you feel and how you think and what your body's doing, how you tend to use it, and sort of break that down into your consciousness a little bit without any judgment at first, because people can get really judgmental and they're like, I should look this way and I should move that way and I should feel this way, and just get an
Mm.
observation of what you're like, and then really try to aim that at being a little bit more authentic for who you are, and that helps all kinds of things long term too.
Mm. I love that. I love that. And I love the whole, you talked about slowing down and that first question, I eat to nourish myself and my body. Just
Yeah.
that alone before you eat can totally change the way you eat and how you're going to digest your food and
Yeah.
also your choices.
It
So
was really
yeah,
a big thing for me when I tripped over it. It's like, wow, you can really reprogram yourself right at the beginning every time, and it kind of cascades over time. So
yeah.
it's a nice little thing to try.
Some people ask me, they'll say, "Oh, where do I start?" And even before changing what you eat, just changing how you eat and how you sit down to eat. And I think that question is really beautiful. That's a huge difference right from the start, because you're already going to be starting to change your digestion, make it work better. You're going to be calming down. And then I think that question really helps with creating the awareness too. So that's really lovely, Todd. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
And your book, so Off Food, Why Do You Trouble Me So Much, is available on Amazon, I'm assuming, and anywhere that books are sold.
Tried to get it everywhere I could. So it's pretty much everywhere you can find it. There's an audiobook version, which is me. If you like my
Okay.
book, that kind of thing. I think it's nice to hear from authors. So I wanted to do that for people too.
Yeah, I love listening to books read by the author. So your website is nytality.com. So a combination of Nyholm and Vitality. So NYTALITY.com. And you're on Facebook at Todd Nils Nyholm. So TODDNILSNYHOLM.
That's it. Yeah.
Perfect. We got it. All right. Thank you so much, Todd. I'm really happy that we had this conversation today, and I think my audience is going to really get something out of this and learn something. So
I'm
thank
so glad
you.
to be here. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Okay. Bye.
Bye bye.